I've kept this story buried for years, a chilling secret I've never dared to share until now. It happened when I was a kid, around 10 or 11. Our school organized a field trip to Whispering Woods, a sprawling forest reserve known for its scenic trails and tranquil lakes. The place had an air of ancient mystery, with towering trees and hidden groves that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. The rangers were friendly, always ready with a tale or two about the wood's storied history. The day began like any other school trip, filled with chatter, laughter, and the occasional mischief. My best friend, Danny, and I were the usual suspects when it came to finding trouble. This trip was no different. We had a plan to slip away from the group and explore the unmarked trails that promised adventure. As the rest of the class followed Miss Thompson to the picnic area, Danny and I hung back near the lily-covered pond, our eyes scanning for the perfect moment to vanish. The water was still, the lilies floating serenely as dragonflies danced above. The sunlight dappled through the canopy, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the ground. That's when we saw him. A jester. Yes, a jester standing in the clearing, juggling vibrant, oddly shaped objects. His costume was a patchwork of mismatched fabrics, and his painted smile stretched unnaturally wide. To us, he was a curiosity, an oddity in the mundane setting of the woods. His presence was so out of the ordinary that it drew us in. "Hey boys, want to see something amazing?" His voice was smooth, inviting, like a lullaby that coaxed us closer. We glanced at each other. Danny's eyes sparkled with intrigue, and without a second thought, we approached the jester. He gestured for us to follow him, leading us deeper into the forest, far from the familiar trails. We arrived at a crumbling stone cottage, half hidden by overgrown ivy and moss. The door, barely hanging on its hinges, creaked as it opened. Without hesitation, we stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, something that set my nerves on edge. Danny clutched my arm, but we pressed on, the jester's grin growing darker, more sinister. Then, everything went black. When I woke, the world outside the cottage was different. The jester was gone, and Danny was just beginning to stir. We stumbled out into a transformed forest, shrouded in an unnatural twilight. Ash, not snow, drifted from the sky, dissolving upon touch. The trees, once vibrant, now loomed like skeletal sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky. "What's happening?" Danny's voice was a whisper, laced with fear. The forest was silent, oppressive. Every step we took was swallowed by the stillness, our voices echoing back at us like ghostly mockeries. Then the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, broke the silence behind us. We turned to see the jester, but he had changed. His jovial appearance had twisted into something malevolent. His painted smile was now a grotesque sneer, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural light. His limbs contorted, his body shifting in ways that defied nature, bones snapping audibly as he transformed into a monstrous version of himself. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Danny's hand. We dashed through the forest, the shadows deepening with every step, the jester's laughter echoing around us, chilling and relentless. The paths that once seemed so clear now twisted and turned, leading us in circles. The forest had become a labyrinth, and the jester was its master. We finally reached what should have been the exit, only to find an ancient iron gate, covered in rust and thorns, barring our escape. Our hearts pounded in our chests as we turned to face the creature that had once been a man. His voice, distorted and cruel, echoed through the clearing. "You'll never leave," it hissed, advancing slowly, savoring our fear. Just as hope began to fade, a beam of pure, radiant light pierced the darkness. It enveloped the jester, who let out a scream that echoed through the woods, before vanishing into the other. In his place stood a guardian, clad in ancient garb, eyes burning with righteous fire. "You're safe now," the guardian spoke, his voice a soothing balm to our frayed nerves. He guided us back through the forest, the gate disappearing as mysteriously as it had appeared. Danny and I never spoke of that day, not to each other or anyone else, but the memory lingered, etched into our minds. Even now, every time I see a jester's costume or walk through a forest, I can't shake the feeling that somewhere, in the hidden depths of Whispering Woods, that dark figure waits, biding its time, ready to ensnare the next unwary traveler. The next story. Listen to it till the end. It will surprise you with its unexpected twist. The Man Next Door. I moved to Lakewood Grove, a quiet suburb just outside Chicago, thinking it would be a fresh start. The kind of place where you could leave your doors unlocked, where the biggest drama was some HOA dispute about lawn decorations. My apartment was a small one-bedroom unit in a duplex, a step up from the shoebox I'd been renting downtown. The guy next door, Tom, seemed like a decent enough neighbor. Mid-30s, quiet, dressed like someone who worked a boring office job. He had this old-school charm, always nodding in greeting but never lingering for small talk. His place was a mirror of mine, same layout, same paper-thin walls. Then, one night, he was gone. Not the kind of moved out and left a forwarding address gone. More like vanished without a trace. That's when the noises started. At first, I figured it was my imagination. The sound of furniture scraping against the floor, muffled footsteps pacing back and forth at odd hours. But Tom was gone. I saw the landlord unlock his door one morning, step inside, and come out shaking his head. "Place is empty," he muttered, mostly to himself. So who the hell was moving around in there at night? I did what any rational person would do. I ignored it. I turned up the volume on my TV, put in earbuds, pretended I didn't hear a damn thing. But ignoring a problem doesn't make it disappear. It makes it grow claws. One night, the noise changed. Instead of footsteps, it was a dull thud. Then another, a rhythmic pounding, slow and deliberate, like someone was slamming something heavy against the wall we shared. I pressed my ear against the drywall. It sounded close, too close. And then I heard breathing. Deep, slow, right on the other side of the wall. I yanked away like I'd been burned. My pulse hammered in my throat. I told myself it was the pipes, the wind, the building settling. Anything but the truth. The next day, I knocked on Tom's door. I don't know what I expected, for him to open up and laugh it off. Instead, the door creaked open an inch, unlocked. My gut twisted. I knew stepping inside was a bad idea. I did it anyway. The place was stripped bare. No furniture, no clothes, no pictures on the walls. Just a single wooden chair in the middle of the living room. And on the seat, a small folded piece of paper. I picked it up. 4 words, written in jagged, frantic letters. Don't let him in. Something creaked behind me. I spun around, heart in my throat. The apartment was empty. I left, locking the door behind me. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made my skin crawl. And just before dawn, as I lay staring at the ceiling, I heard it again. Thud, thud, thud. Slow, heavy, coming from inside my own apartment. I never saw Tom again. Never found out where he went, or who, or what had been in his place. But I moved out the next day, leaving everything behind except for that note. Some doors should stay closed. Some neighbors should stay missing. The next story, for its unexpected final, it's worth listening to till the end. I've never been one for superstition or ghost stories, but what happened to me back in the summer of '98 at Whispering Pines changed my perspective forever. This isn't just a recollection, it's a warning. Every word is true. That summer, my high school friends and I decided to spend a weekend camping in Whispering Pines, a dense and ancient forest. The place was notorious for its eerie atmosphere and local legends. Stories of strange happenings, whispers in the wind, and sightings of shadowy figures were common among the townsfolk. We, of course, scoffed at these tales, brushing them off as mere folklore. We were a tight-knit group of 5. Alex, our fearless leader; Emily, his equally adventurous girlfriend; Ryan, the jokester; Karen, the quiet observer; and me, always the tag-along, eager for a sense of belonging. Our first day in the forest was uneventful. We set up camp, collected firewood, and explored the immediate area. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature: chirping birds, rustling leaves, and the occasional scampering of small animals. As night fell, we gathered around the campfire, swapping ghost stories and laughing at the absurdity of it all. It was Ryan who brought up the legend of the guardian of Whispering Pines, a spectral figure said to roam the forest. According to the lore, he was once a ranger, a protector of the woods, until a tragic accident led to his disappearance. Some believed his spirit still wandered, guiding or punishing those who entered the forest. "Come on, Ryan," Karen said, rolling her eyes. "You don't actually believe that, do you?" Ryan shrugged, his grin mischievous. "Who knows? Makes for a good story, though." Alex chuckled. "Well, if we meet him, we'll invite him to join us for marshmallows." The mood lightened, and we eventually retreated to our tents. The forest seemed to settle into an uneasy silence, the kind that makes every rustle and creak stand out. I fell asleep with the campfire stories lingering in my mind. It was sometime in the dead of night when I awoke. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard it. Soft whispers, barely audible but unmistakable. They seemed to come from all around, calling my name. "Jake, Jake." I sat up, heart pounding. Grabbing my flashlight, I unzipped my tent and stepped into the cool night. The whispers grew louder, beckoning me deeper into the woods. I glanced back at the camp. My friends were still sound asleep. Compelled by an inexplicable force, I followed the whispers. The trees loomed overhead, their branches forming eerie shapes in the darkness. The air grew colder, and a shiver ran down my spine. Suddenly, the whispers ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence. Then, out of the shadows, he appeared. A tall figure in a tattered ranger uniform, his face obscured by the dim light. He stood motionless, his presence overwhelming. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the air. "The forest is not safe." I was paralyzed with fear, unable to speak or move. The figure stepped closer, his hollow eyes staring into mine. "Go back," he whispered, "before it's too late." Without a second thought, I turned and ran, the whispers echoing behind me. I stumbled back into the camp, gasping for breath. My friends, now awake, looked at me with concern. "Jake, what happened?" Emily asked. "We need to leave," I panted. "Now." Alex frowned. "Leave? Why?" I struggled to find the words. "I saw him. The guardian. He told me we have to leave." Ryan laughed nervously. "Jake, it's just your imagination. The stories got to you." "No," I insisted. "It was real. We have to go." Karen glanced around, her expression wary. "Maybe we should listen to him. This place, it feels different." Reluctantly, the others agreed, and we began packing up. The forest seemed to close in around us, the whispers growing louder with each passing moment. The once familiar path twisted and turned, leading us deeper into the woods. Panic set in as we realized we were lost. The whispers became a cacophony, drowning out our thoughts. Shadows danced in the corners of our vision, and the air grew heavy with an unexplainable dread. Then, out of the darkness, the guardian appeared again. He raised his hand, and the whispers ceased. The forest fell silent. "You cannot leave," he said, his voice echoing with authority. "The forest has claimed you." Alex stepped forward, trying to assert himself. "Who are you? What do you want?" The guardian's eyes bore into him. "I am the keeper of this forest. You have trespassed into its heart, and now you must face the consequences." "We didn't mean any harm," Karen pleaded. We just want to go home. The guardian shook his head. There is no escape. The forest has taken you. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and shadowy figures emerged from the trees. Twisted, monstrous shapes with glowing eyes. They surrounded us, cutting off any escape. Run, Alex shouted, but there was nowhere to go. The creatures closed in, their growls filling the air. Just as all hope seemed lost, a blinding light erupted from the guardian, scattering the shadows. The creatures recoiled, retreating into the darkness. Follow the light, the guardian commanded. It will lead you to safety. Without hesitation, we followed the light. The path now clear. The whispers faded, and the shadows receded. We emerged from the forest, exhausted and shaken but alive. We never spoke of that night again, each of us haunted by the memories of the guardian and the horrors of Whispering Pines. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I still hear the whispers, reminding me that the forest is always watching, always waiting. The next few days after our return were a blur. Each of us tried to go back to our normal lives, but the memories of Whispering Pines clung to us like a dark shadow. Sleep was elusive, and when it came, it was plagued by nightmares. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of the wind, brought back the terror of that night. Desperate for answers, I began researching the history of Whispering Pines. The local library was a treasure trove of old newspapers and folklore books. The stories I found were chilling. Tales of disappearances, of people hearing voices, and of sightings of the guardian dated back centuries. It seemed the forest had always been a place of mystery and danger. One particular account stood out, an old journal belonging to a ranger named Samuel Harris, dated 1903. Harris wrote of a deep connection with the forest, describing it as alive and sentient. His entries grew darker over time, filled with warnings about a presence that watched over the woods. His final entry read, "The forest has chosen me. I am its guardian now." The implications were terrifying. Could it be that Harris had become the guardian we encountered? The thought sent shivers down my spine. I needed to know more, but my friends refused to discuss the event, each coping in their own way. Alex buried himself in work. Emily took up meditation. Ryan avoided the topic altogether, and Karen moved away, seeking solace elsewhere. I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was calling me back. Against my better judgment, I decided to return to Whispering Pines alone. I needed closure, needed to understand what had happened, and why we were spared. I arrived at the edge of the forest at dusk, the fading light casting eerie shadows. The trees stood tall and silent, their twisted branches forming a natural barrier. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the woods, the whispers starting almost immediately. The forest felt different this time, more alive, more aware of my presence. I followed the whispers, my flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. The path twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the heart of Whispering Pines. "Why have you returned?" The familiar voice echoed around me. The guardian emerged from the shadows, his hollow eyes fixed on me. I needed answers, I said, my voice trembling. "Why did you spare us? What is this place?" "The forest is ancient," the guardian replied. "Its secrets are beyond human understanding. You were spared because you showed respect, because you listened. Many have not been so fortunate." "Who are you?" I asked. "Were you Samuel Harris?" The guardian's expression softened, a hint of sorrow in his hollow eyes. "I was once. The forest claimed me, made me its protector. Now, I am bound to it, as you are bound to your own fate." "Can you leave?" I asked, desperate to understand. The guardian shook his head. "The forest does not release its guardians. It is my duty to protect it, to guide those who enter, and to ensure its secrets remain hidden." "Will it ever let us go?" I whispered, fear gripping my heart. The guardian stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "The forest has its own will. You must respect it, or it will consume you. Remember this, the forest is always watching, always waiting." With those final words, the guardian vanished into the shadows, leaving me alone in the silent woods. The whispers faded, and the path back to the edge of the forest became clear. I followed it, the weight of his words heavy on my mind. As I stepped out of the forest, the first rays of dawn broke through the horizon, casting light on the dark secrets of Whispering Pines. I knew I could never return, but the forest would always be a part of me, a reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I still hear the whispers, calling me back to the heart of the forest, where the guardian watches, waiting for those who dare to uncover its secrets. Part 1. The Whispers in the Pines. The wind was silent. It wasn't the kind of silence that gave you peace, the sort that filled the forest with a calm stillness. No, this silence was oppressive. It was a weight that pressed down on your chest, leaving your breath shallow, your senses on edge. I've been working as a park ranger for over 20 years, and I've seen things that most people would never believe. But that night, as I stood at the edge of the Pine Ridge Trail, I felt something in the air. Something dark, something old. My name is Ben Walker, and I patrol the far reaches of the Blackwater Forest. The locals don't like to talk about it much. Too many stories, too many things that can't be explained. But every now and then, when the days grow shorter and the sun dips below the horizon too quickly, you start hearing things that shouldn't be there. Whispers in the wind, rustling in the leaves that never seem to stop. It started with a call from the campsite at the river bend, a place that had always felt wrong. Not evil, exactly. Just off. A place where the trees leaned in too close, where the river never sounded right. It had always been one of those places that gave me a bad feeling, even though there was never any good reason for it. Ben, you there? Dispatch's voice crackled through my radio. We've got a report from the campers near the river. They're hearing strange sounds. Some kind of growl. They're freaked out. Can you check it out? I sighed, ready to dismiss it as just another campfire tale. But my gut told me this wasn't the usual nonsense. The air felt thick tonight. Charge. I grabbed my flashlight and started my patrol. As I moved deeper into the woods, the sky above me was clouded over. But there was something about the dark that was too still, too unnerving. The forest was holding its breath. I could feel the weight of it pressing against my chest. The trail was winding, unfamiliar in a way that made my steps falter. I had walked this path countless times before, but tonight, it felt different, like the woods themselves were shifting, changing. There were no animal sounds, no insects, not even the wind, only silence, a silence so thick it seemed to press against my skull. When I reached the river bend, the campsite was deserted. The fire pit had long since burned out, and the tents were collapsed, abandoned. It didn't make sense. The campers had called me less than an hour ago. Where were they? I stepped closer, scanning the area for any sign of life, but everything was still. Then I saw the tracks. They weren't human, but they weren't animal either. The prints were large, too large, stretching across the mud like something was dragging its feet behind it. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't alone. I heard the rustling behind me. Slow, deliberate. Not the kind of movement you hear from animals. More like footsteps. Not quick, but heavy, like someone, or something, was moving deliberately, following me. I spun around, the flashlight catching nothing but the trees, thick and dark as ever. But there was a presence now. Something was there, watching me. Then the growl came, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated the air around me. It came from the forest, from behind the trees. I froze. It wasn't an animal, not a bear, not a wolf. It was something else. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I reached for my radio, but before I could speak, the voice came through again, distorted and low, like it was coming from miles away. Leave the woods. Now. My breath caught in my throat. I'd heard that voice before. But it wasn't anyone from dispatch. It wasn't anyone I knew. The ground beneath me shifted. A massive weight pressed against the earth. And then the growl came again, louder, closer. And that's when I saw it. The eyes, glowing, red and hungry, pushed through the darkness like twin beacons. Something massive moved just beyond the trees. The air around me crackled, thick with something ancient, something that didn't belong in the world anymore. Part 2. The Thing in the Shadows. The creature emerged slowly, its large, lumbering figure barely visible through the thick fog rolling in. The air smelled of rotting leaves and something worse, like death, but older, ancient. The moonlight glinted off its hide, thick and matted with grime. But it wasn't just the size that threw me off. It was the way it moved. It was too fast for something that large, too sure of itself. It stopped just out of the range of my flashlight, its eyes glowing a fierce red, fixed on me like a predator. Its face, a twisted, gnarly thing, was stretched too wide, the teeth sharp and yellow like something from a nightmare. My heart hammered in my chest as I tried to back away, but my feet felt frozen to the ground. What the hell is that thing? I thought, my mind racing through every creature I'd ever heard of in the woods. This wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a bear. Hell, it wasn't anything from this world. It was something older, something far more dangerous. I tried to move, but every step felt like I was walking through molasses, like the very air was weighing me down. The creature took a slow step forward, its massive footfall shaking the earth beneath me. Its growl came again, but this time it was quieter, more like a whisper. "You shouldn't have come." The words weren't spoken, but I could hear them. In my mind, the voice was deep, guttural, like the very earth was speaking to me. I backed up, but I knew there was no escape. The trees around me seemed to close in, the shadows stretching further as though they were alive, feeding on the fear that radiated from me. My flashlight flickered, dimming with each breath I took, until it finally went out, plunging me into darkness. In the pitch-black silence, I heard something move, something fast. I didn't wait to see what it was. I turned and ran. My feet slapped against the ground, the sound of my own breath drowning out everything else. But I could feel it. The creature was following me, its heavy footfalls like thunder, getting closer and closer with every second. I stumbled through the trees, branches scratching at my skin, my heart racing as I tried to find my bearings. But then, just when I thought I couldn't run any longer, I saw something in the distance, a light, a lantern, swinging gently in the wind. I sprinted towards it, hoping, praying it wasn't another illusion. And as I got closer, I saw the figure standing in the glow. It was another ranger. Part 3. The Old Ranger. The figure stood still, holding the lantern in one hand, casting an eerie glow across the trees. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stumbled forward, desperate for any kind of help. The light flickered in the breeze, casting long, twisted shadows that danced across the forest floor. The ranger was older, with a weathered face, deep lines etched into his skin. His uniform was torn in places, like he'd been out here for days, weeks, maybe. His eyes, however, were what struck me most. They were cold, calculating, like he had seen this all before, like he knew exactly what I had just gone through. "You shouldn't be here, son," he said, his voice rough, almost a growl itself. His eyes scanned the darkness around us, and his grip on the lantern tightened. There was no fear in his voice, no hesitation, just a strange, quiet certainty. What is it?" I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "That thing in the woods. It's not an animal. It's something else. I don't know what the hell I saw." The old ranger didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the trees, as if searching for something just beyond the reach of the lantern's light. He stepped closer to me, his boots crunching softly on the dry leaves, and I couldn't help but notice how his eyes kept darting around, never fully locking onto me. "They'd been here long before us," he muttered, his voice so quiet it was barely a whisper, long before the park was ever even a thought. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Who has?" I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, finally, he looked me dead in the eyes, his expression unreadable. "The things that live in the dark. The things that feed on fear. They're not just stories. They're not myths. They're real." I took a step back, my pulse hammering in my ears. The creature, the growls, the whispers, it all came rushing back, flooding my mind with a new wave of terror. "What do you mean real? What the hell is that thing? What's going on in these woods?" The ranger's gaze hardened. He looked at me as if weighing something, whether I was ready to hear the truth, or whether he should just let me walk away, let me live with the lies. Finally, he spoke again, his words like a curse. "It's a Wendigo," he said flatly. "But not just any Wendigo. This one's different. It's been hunting these woods for as long as anyone can remember, and if you've seen it, you've crossed a line. It won't let you leave." I blinked, trying to process what he had just said. Wendigo. I had heard the stories. The legends of creatures that were more than just flesh, more than just hunger. Beings that preyed on those who wandered too far into the wilds. Creatures that consumed both body and soul. But this was different. It was too real, too close to the bone. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of it. I saw its eyes, I stammered. It wasn't just a trick of the light. It spoke to me. It wanted me. The ranger's face tightened, and his hand moved instinctively to the side of his belt, where a glint of metal caught my eye. A hunting knife. It was old, the blade worn but sharp, the handle worn smooth by years of use. He gripped it firmly as he looked me over. "Eyes aren't the worst of it," he muttered, almost to himself. "The worst is what it does to your mind. It gets inside you. It twists your thoughts, makes you see things that aren't there. And when it's done with you, you'll never be the same. If you're lucky, it'll just kill you. But if you're not..." He trailed off, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. The old ranger had seen things. He knew, and that made the pit in my stomach grow deeper, heavier. The forest seemed to close in around us, the silence growing deafening again. My flashlight flickered back to life, but it cast only dim shadows, barely enough to pierce the overwhelming darkness. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How do we stop it?" The ranger's lips twisted into something that might have been a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. He looked over at me, the lantern light reflecting off the empty void in his stare. "We don't stop it," he said softly. "We just survive." Before I could respond, the growl came again. It was louder this time, closer. A low, primal sound that seemed to reverberate from the very ground beneath our feet. My skin crawled as the hairs on my neck stood straight up. The air smelled different now, thick with rot, with decay. The ranger didn't flinch. He didn't move. He just stood there, holding the lantern steady, his eyes locked on the trees. His hand never left the knife at his side. "You think you've seen it all," he said, his voice barely audible. "But the woods aren't just full of trees. They're full of things that shouldn't be. Things that are older than anything we can understand." Before I could respond, something large moved in the distance, something fast, too fast to be human. My stomach dropped as the shadows shifted, and the figure emerged from the darkness, walking toward us with an unnatural ease. I couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I felt the weight of the night pressing down on me, suffocating me. The figure grew closer, its shape becoming clearer with each step. It was massive, hulking, too tall, too wide. And those eyes, red, glowing, hungry. And then the old ranger spoke, his voice as cold and empty as the woods themselves. "Run." Part 4. Into the dark. I didn't think. I just ran. My feet pounded against the earth, my breath ragged. the sound of my heartbeat deafening in my ears. The growl echoed behind me, but I didn't dare look back. The trees around me blurred as I sprinted down the trail, dodging branches and rocks. The weight of the night seemed to press on me from all sides, and the further I ran, the more I felt it. Something hunting me, something just out of reach, but getting closer with every passing second. The old ranger's voice echoed in my mind. Survive. But I wasn't sure if I could. I didn't know how to survive something like this, something that wasn't even supposed to exist. I crashed through the underbrush, my legs burning, my mind a mess of terror and disbelief. And then something grabbed my ankle. I screamed as I was yanked off my feet and thrown violently to the ground. My head hit a rock, and for a moment, everything went black. When I came to, I was still on the forest floor, my body aching, my vision blurry. The creature stood over me, its massive form blotting out the stars. The glowing red eyes seemed to consume the darkness itself. It opened its mouth, revealing teeth that could rip through bone. And then I heard it, felt it, whispering in my mind, "You shouldn't have run." I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. All I could do was stare up into those eyes, knowing that whatever happened next, my life had already been claimed. And then, the world went black. Part 1. The Whistle in the Dark. There are places in the world that seem ordinary at first glance, but hide an ancient, unspoken power. Blackwood Forest was one of those places. It stretched over miles of rugged terrain, where sunlight barely touched the forest floor, and the air always seemed heavy, thick with secrets. For years, people spoke in hushed tones about the forest, about strange sounds at night, and figures glimpsed at the edge of your vision. But most dismissed these as nothing more than the stories of locals, tales to keep tourists away or simply entertain themselves around the fire. I never took these stories seriously when I was hired as a park ranger in Blackwood. To me, it was just another job, checking campsites, ensuring safety, and maintaining the trails. I wasn't looking for anything out of the ordinary. But that night, everything changed. It was my first night shift alone in the forest, and the air was unusually still, the wind eerily absent. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving only the dim light of the moon to guide my steps. As I walked along the north trail, a strange sensation crept over me. I couldn't explain it, just the sense that something was watching me, lurking just beyond the trees. I laughed it off as nerves, but that didn't stop the unease that prickled my skin. I checked the map again, making sure I was on the right path. The North Trail was quiet tonight, too quiet. It was always a little eerie at night. But tonight, the silence was almost suffocating. That's when I heard it, a low, faint whistle. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was a clear, deliberate whistle, the kind someone might use to call a friend, or perhaps to guide them through the dark. But there was no one else here. My eyes scanned the dense forest around me, the shadows stretching long in the moonlight. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky despite myself. There was no answer, just the faint sound of rustling leaves, and then a second whistle, this one closer. A chill ran down my spine. I wasn't alone. I couldn't explain it, but everything about the situation felt off. The whistle wasn't the kind of sound you would hear from a hiker or a camper. It was too purposeful, too unsettling. I tried to dismiss the thought, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was waiting for me. The forest, which had once felt like a familiar, safe place, now felt like an endless maze, and I couldn't escape the sensation that something was moving just beyond the range of my flashlight. A low growl echoed from the trees. I froze. The whistle stopped immediately. My heart raced, and my body went rigid. That growl wasn't from any animal I knew. It sounded too deep, too wrong. I didn't want to believe it, but the growl seemed to wrap around me, seeping into my bones, making the very air feel thick with danger. The flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows across the path. I raced it higher, trying to pierce the darkness. But everything felt wrong. The growl came again, this time closer, and I could hear the sound of something large moving through the underbrush. My mind screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. Every instinct told me to turn back, to leave the forest, but something held me in place. The trees ahead seemed to shift as if something was standing just behind them, watching me, waiting. My breathing quickened, and I swallowed hard, trying to calm myself. I had to stay focused. I had to stay professional. But then, through the trees, I saw something. A figure, tall and unnaturally thin, standing motionless. Its back to me. The moonlight glinted off something metal in its hand. What could it be? A weapon. I couldn't make it out clearly, but the figure was unnerving. Its outline too perfect, too unnatural. I called out again, my voice trembling. "Who's there?" There was no answer, but the figure didn't move either. It remained standing there, still as death itself. And then, a low, rasping voice came from the darkness, carrying on the wind. "You shouldn't be here." Part 2. The Forest's Watcher. The voice had no warmth, no empathy, just coldness. It didn't feel like it came from the figure, but from everywhere around me, echoing in my mind, vibrating through the very ground beneath my boots. I stepped back, feeling the weight of the words pressing against me, like invisible hands pushing me away. I tried to speak again, but my voice failed me. The figure, if it was even a person, hadn't moved, but its presence filled the space around me like smoke, suffocating, disorienting. I couldn't make sense of it. How had it known I was there? I was alone on this trail. There was no one else, no hikers or campers nearby. And yet there it stood, unmoving, its form an unsettling silhouette in the pale moonlight. I felt a sudden compulsion to move closer, though every instinct screamed at me to run. I took one hesitant step forward, my feet dragging through the wet earth. Something wasn't right. The trees, tall, ancient sentinels, seemed to bend toward the figure, their branches twisting and shifting, as if they too were watching. The air was thick now, heavy with something I couldn't identify, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Another whisper, a harsh, grating sound that seemed to come from the very roots of the trees, filled the air. "You must leave." The command was simple, clear, but its meaning, its weight, unsettled me more than the growl I had heard earlier. My heart pounded louder in my ears. I had been trained for all sorts of situations, lost hikers, wild animals, even emergency rescues. But this was different. This wasn't an animal or a person. This was something else. I forced my legs to move, pushing myself forward, as if I was drawn to the figure against my will. My flashlight flickered again, and when the beam settled, I saw it, its face. The pale, almost translucent skin stretched tight across its skull, its eyes black as coal, voids that seemed to pull the light in, swallowing it whole. The figure raised a hand, and I stopped in my tracks, the world narrowing into a tunnel of dread. It pointed directly at me, a single, slow motion, as though marking me. The trees around me groaned, the sound deep and mournful, like the forest itself was coming alive, responding to the figure's command. The ground trembled beneath my boots, and I could feel something stirring beneath the earth, something old, ancient, that had been lying dormant for far too long. "You don't belong here." The voice rasped, a low, vibrating sound that made my bones ache. It wasn't the tone of a person, but something older, deeper, like it had been spoken by the forest itself. I could feel my breath quickening, panic beginning to claw at my chest, but something in me, the ranger, the professional, forced me to keep my eyes on the figure. I wanted to call for backup, to reach for my radio, but the weight of the moment made it impossible to move. The figure's eyes were locked on mine, and I couldn't look away. The longer I stared, the more I felt a strange pull, like I was sinking into it, into the darkness that seemed to grow around me. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure took a step back, disappearing into the thick shadows of the trees. For a moment, I stood there, rooted to the spot, unsure of what had just happened. But the whistle came again. It was closer now, so close I could almost feel the wind from it against my skin. And this time, it was followed by a low guttural growl, the sound vibrating in the air, deep and menacing. My heart slammed in my chest as I whipped my flashlight around, searching the darkness. And that's when I saw it. The creature. It wasn't human. It wasn't any animal I knew. It was tall, impossibly tall, with arms that stretched too long and fingers that ended in claws. Its eyes glowed in the dark, red and hungry, and its body was covered in matted, dark fur that rippled as it moved. It stood on two legs, but there was something wrong with the way it moved. Too fast, too fluid, as if it was both part of the shadows and yet separate from them. The growl came again, this time directly from the creature's throat, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. For a moment, the world went still again, the air thick with tension. I knew I couldn't outrun it. I couldn't fight it. My only option was to survive, to outwit it, to make it out of this forest alive. The creature stepped forward, and I stepped back, my mind racing for any escape. But the path was blocked. The trees, the dense underbrush, it all seemed to close in around me, as if the forest itself was trapping me. The whistle sounded again, and this time it was clear, clear enough to hear that it was a call. A call to something more, something even darker than the creature now standing before me. Part 3. The approach. The creature's eyes never left me. They burned with an otherworldly glow, their intensity making my body freeze in place. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. My body was locked in place by a fear so deep it reached down into my soul, twisting my instincts into submission. For a moment, everything felt unreal. The forest around me seemed to warp, the trees stretching upward in unnatural angles. The ground beneath me shifted, softening into a spongy, almost liquid texture, as if the earth itself was pulsing with the creature's presence. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was the embodiment of the forest, of the darkness that had always lived here, waiting. The creature took a step forward. Its massive form loomed larger with each movement, its claws scraping against the bark of a nearby tree. The sound was sickening, like metal on stone, and it made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. Its breath was heavy, deep, as if it had been waiting for this moment for centuries. It didn't make a sound now, just moved closer, its eyes locked on mine, as if it could sense my every thought, my every fear. I knew I should run. I knew I should find a way out, but I couldn't. Every time I tried to move, my body refused to obey. It was like the forest itself was holding me in place, the roots beneath my feet anchoring me to the ground. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take the suffocating tension any longer, the whistle came again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't a call. It wasn't a signal. It was a warning. A sharp, shrill sound that seemed to tear through the very air, reaching into my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs. The creature stopped moving. I couldn't see where it had come from, but I knew it was here. The figure from earlier, the one with the black voids for eyes, emerged from the darkness. It moved with a kind of silent grace, its presence somehow more terrifying than the creature. The way it moved, slow, deliberate, like a shadow slipping between worlds, filled me with an instinctual terror. The creature tensed, its body went rigid, and for a moment, it seemed to shrink under the gaze of the figure. The tension in the air was palpable. I could feel the weight of something ancient and powerful pressing down on me, and for the first time since I had arrived in Blackwood, I felt completely, utterly powerless. The figure didn't speak at first. It simply stood there, its empty eyes locked on the creature, as if weighing its very existence. The creature growled low, but the sound seemed to lose its strength, fading into the night like a memory fading from a dream. And then the figure spoke. "You do not belong here, either." The words were soft, but they carried a weight that made the ground tremble beneath me. The creature's growl faltered, its body seeming to shrink even further, retreating into the shadows as though it couldn't bear to be near the figure. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what was happening, why the creature was retreating, or why the figure had such an influence over it. But I knew one thing. This was far from over. This was just the beginning. The figure turned its gaze toward me, and I could feel its presence in my chest, like it was inside my very being, burrowing into my mind. Its voice came again, slow and haunting. "You shouldn't have come." There was no malice in the voice, no anger. It was just a statement, a fact, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. The forest, the creatures within it, the figure itself, it all had a purpose, a design, and I was an intruder. I didn't know what it wanted. I didn't know why it was speaking to me, or why the creature was retreating. I only knew that I was in the presence of something far older and more dangerous than I could ever comprehend. The rules of the world I knew no longer applied here. The figure stepped forward, its shadow stretching across the clearing like the hand of death itself. I could feel it moving closer, but I couldn't bring myself to look away. I could feel it, its power, its hunger, drawing me in. And then, just as it was about to reach out, the creature made its move. It darted forward, faster than I thought possible, and before I could react, it was gone, vanishing into the thick, inky blackness of the forest, its growl echoing faintly in the distance. I didn't know whether I was relieved or terrified. The creature was gone, but the figure remained, standing there, watching me. "You will remember this," it said, its voice like the rustling of dry leaves, its gaze never leaving mine. And then it turned, disappearing back into the shadows, leaving me alone in the clearing. Part 4. The Eyes of the Forest. The moment the figure vanished, the oppressive silence of Blackwood returned, but it felt different now, heavier, as though something had shifted. The air was thick with a lingering sense of dread, a feeling that wasn't going to go away anytime soon. The forest, which had once seemed so familiar, now felt like a vast, unknowable entity, with eyes watching me from every angle. I stood there, frozen in place, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My heart hammered in my chest, my mind racing through the images of the creature, the figure, the growl, and the whistle. I could still hear that low hum of the wind, the whispering leaves, and just barely the eyes. The feeling that something was watching me, even now, wouldn't leave. With shaking hands, I pulled out my radio, only to find the signal dead. The light on my flashlight flickered again, casting long shadows across the path ahead of me. I wanted to turn back, to run out of the forest and never return, but the thought of what was waiting behind me, what I had already seen, kept me rooted to the spot. What the hell had I gotten myself into? I couldn't explain the figure, the creature, or the force that seemed to surround me. The rational part of my brain screamed that it was all some kind of hallucination, some twisted trick of the mind. But deep down in my gut, I knew it wasn't. I had felt the presence, tasted the fear, and now it was like the very trees themselves were alive, watching, waiting for something. I decided to move forward, not because I was brave, but because standing still felt worse. As I walked, my flashlight illuminated the ground ahead, revealing the trail, the roots twisting and clawing at the earth. The woods seemed to stretch out forever in every direction, endless and suffocating. There was no escape. The whistle came again, faint but undeniable. This time, it wasn't coming from a distance. It was close. Too close. My pulse quickened. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, but it was as if the very trees themselves were alive, murmuring to each other in a language I couldn't understand. The air felt thick with energy, the trees pressing in on me from all sides. And that sound, the whistle, was getting louder. It was right next to me. I stopped dead in my tracks, shining my flashlight in every direction, but the beam revealed nothing. just the deep, impenetrable blackness of the woods. And then I heard it. The growl. The same guttural sound from before. It rumbled through the ground like thunder, vibrating through my bones, shaking me to my core. The creature. The one from earlier. It was back. I turned around, scanning the trees behind me, but I saw nothing. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. The whistle came again, almost mocking me. And then the growl. Closer this time. I had no choice but to run. I couldn't stand here and wait for whatever was following me. My legs were weak with fear, but I pushed myself forward, moving as fast as I could, my flashlight bouncing wildly with each step. The path was narrow and treacherous, branches reaching out to claw at me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My lungs burned as I'd forced myself up the incline, the growl still echoing behind me, now joined by something else. A low, rumbling noise that seemed to come from all around. The woods themselves felt alive, the trees groaning and swaying, like they were closing in, trying to trap me. Every step forward felt like a struggle, the darkness thickening, suffocating me. And then, through the trees, I saw it. A flicker of light, a break in the canopy, a sign of the outside world. I ran toward it, not thinking, not looking back. The growl, now closer than ever, filled the air, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps, something large moving through the underbrush. I could feel the creature behind me, its breath hot on my neck, but I didn't dare turn around. I broke through the tree line, crashing into an open clearing, the moonlight pouring down like a silver waterfall. For a moment, I thought I was free. I thought I was safe, but the whistle came again, this time directly behind me. I spun around, breathless, my heart pounding in my throat. And that's when I saw it. The creature stood at the edge of the trees, its eyes glowing in the dark, reflecting the light like twin embers. It wasn't just one creature anymore. There were others, two, figures that moved between the shadows, too fast for me to track, their eyes flickering in and out of sight. I stumbled backward, panic setting in as I realized I wasn't alone. I wasn't safe. The forest wasn't just a place. It was a realm, a living, breathing entity, and it had claimed me. I had stepped too far into its domain, and now it was going to make sure I never left. The whistle came again, louder now, deafening. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a command, a warning. And as the creatures emerged from the shadows, their forms rippling and shifting, I realized there was only one thing I could do. I had to make them believe I belonged. Part 5. The Forest's Claim. The creatures, those shadowy, monstrous figures, moved closer, their eyes gleaming like burning coals in the night. There were more of them now, too many to count. They were an amalgamation of shapes and sounds, humanoid figures twisted into something unrecognizable, their movements fluid, unnatural. Their growls filled the air, low and guttural, but there was something else in their presence. A sense of hunger, a feeling that made my skin crawl. The forest around me seemed to pulse, as if it were alive, responding to the creatures, feeding off the tension in the air. Every tree, every branch, every rustle of the leaves felt like it was part of something much larger than I could understand. I backed up slowly, my eyes never leaving the creatures. The moonlight felt distant, cold, as though the forest itself was swallowing the warmth of the night. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, the only sound breaking the suffocating silence between the growls and whispers of the forest. One of the creatures stepped forward, its long, clawed fingers brushing the bark of a tree as it moved. Its eyes never left mine, locking onto me with a focus that felt predatory. I swallowed hard, trying to find some ounce of courage, but every part of me screamed to run. But where could I go? The trees stretched endlessly in every direction, and the creatures moved faster than I could ever hope to outrun. I wasn't just being hunted. I was being watched by something much older than these creatures, something that had ruled these woods long before humanity ever stepped foot in it. The whispers in the air, the low, almost imperceptible hum, were coming from the trees themselves. The forest wasn't just a place to get lost in. It was a living thing. A thing that had eyes, that had ears, that had power. And it was watching me. I could feel its gaze, feel its awareness settling on me like a weight. I wasn't just an intruder in its domain. I was a part of it now, whether I wanted to be or not. The figure, the one that had spoken to me earlier, reappeared from the shadows, its empty eyes fixed on the creatures. The forest seemed to quiet in its presence, the air thick with anticipation. The creature stilled, as if awaiting some kind of command, but the figure didn't move toward me. Instead, it stood still, its presence stretching across the clearing like a wave of cold. Its gaze flicked toward me, and for a brief moment, I felt a strange connection, a realization that I was no longer just a ranger, no longer just a man. I was something else, something tied to this place. The whistle sounded again, sharp, shrill, and final. The forest responded in kind, the wind carrying the sound like a signal. And as it did, the creatures retreated back into the darkness, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. The figure turned toward the forest, its body dissolving into the shadows. I stood there, my legs weak, my body trembling. It was over, for now. But I knew that it wasn't really over. I had been marked. The creatures, the figure, the forest, they all knew me now. They had seen me, and I had seen them. There was no escaping the truth of what I had witnessed. I had crossed into something that could never be explained, something that could never be understood by the world I had known. I turned and started walking, though I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was still watching me. The trees, the shadows, they were alive with movement, even if I couldn't see it. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though the earth itself was reluctant to let me go. As I walked back toward the ranger station, I didn't dare look over my shoulder, but I could feel the eyes, those unblinking, empty eyes, tracking me from the darkness. The growls were gone, but the forest was still there, holding its breath. I don't know what it was that I encountered in Blackwood, whether it was a creature, a spirit, or something older and darker than anything I could comprehend. But I do know one thing. I was never meant to be there. I crossed a line that night, and the forest, it doesn't forget. It has claimed me now, and I don't think it ever plans to let me go.